Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is a writer, game designer, creator, and performer known as for his work for IDW and Wizards of the Coast, D&D, and actual play RPGs such as Black Dice Society and Dimension 20's Pirates of Leviathan, and many, many more. Please welcome the one and only B. Dave Walters to Epic Realms. Yeah!
That is the dozens and dozens of my fans cheering. Yes,
The
hello, hi.
thousands,
Also, it's,
thousands.
it, I would be, here's what's funny, dear viewer. At the beginning, this fine gentleman was like, I'm going to mention this. Did I forget anything? I'm like, no, it's fine. Is there anything else you want to mention? I'm like, no, it's fine. But now that we're here, be remiss if we didn't mention that I was the first dungeon master with a campaign on television and also DM for the cast of Stranger Things on Netflix Geek. Let's
Ah,
remember the things.
all of the things. There are so many things. There are so many.
There's
You've done
so many things.
so many things.
Honestly, I've forgotten a lot of the things that I've done, and people will ask me about them, or I'll read my IMDb, and I'm like, "Was it? Was it? Oh, that was a thing that happened." Yeah, that is true. I've been very, very blessed and fortunate,
I was putting
beyond
together
deserving.
like some notes and outlines for this, and I'm like, there's so much. We're not going to get to all of it. We'll get to some of it. There's a lot of things that I really want to talk about to you because you've done so many things in so many genres, right? So like I kind of feel like I'm a kindred spirit with you because you've done so many things, whether you're a bodyguard security for Evanescence or whether you're a black belt in multiple things. There's so many different stuff, life coach, actor, and of course all the things we mentioned before. So I would be remiss if we didn't try to touch a little bit on that. But before all of that, tell us about you growing up as a kid and how gaming affected your life when you were younger.
I am from Little Rock, Arkansas. I grew up during the '80s because I'm way older than I look. Was always into geek stuff. Comic books were my early entry. I didn't start playing TTRPGs till I was 13. Started with Rifts very quickly. Started playing AD&D. I lived through the Satanic Panic. I saw these things evolve from being dangerous, which is why I believe there's a D&D subculture now because it was rebellious and it was countercultural and it was something you could do as a teenager that was relatively a low barrier of entry and not really going to hurt you, and yet you still could be rebelling. I think
Yeah.
if not for the Satanic Panic, D&D would be like Monopoly. You just have the red box up on the shelf. You take it down at the holidays to inflict some formative trauma, and then go about your life.
Right.
So I saw these things evolve from dangerous to just lame. So that when this TTRPG Renaissance came about and it was cool, I was actually shocked by that. And I have a specific theory as to why I think that is, but I will pause in my monologue rather than go on about that.
Well, I'm sure we'll probably double our way back to it, or it'll come up at some point. I mean, that's the whole point of this. Like, this is a nerd podcast. Let's be straightforward. That's what this
Then
is. That's what it always is.
let us be nerds. Then.
Of all of your things that you've done, varied that aren't necessarily related directly to RPGs, how did some of those help you in your production of some of the shows you've done, or in your GMing skills, and anything like that?
Well, I have been blessed to have an interesting life where I've been a lot of places and done a lot of things. And the consistent through line in that it sounds more grandiose than I mean it to when I say it out loud, but the through line is reducing human suffering. Everything, because yes, I was a nationally syndicated columnist. I wrote a spirituality column. I wrote a dating advice column. I was a talk radio show host for like 7 years. And it all came back down to helping take people's minds off their troubles for a little while,
Yeah.
or helping people feel like they weren't weird or crazy for feeling how they feel or being alone. And so if it's one of my comic books that can do that for you, or one of the actual plays that can do that for you, or me being like, yeah, you are being gaslit and that person is a narcissist, yes, whatever that means, it kind of helps another human being sort of just exhale a little. It all comes back to that.
That's awesome. when you were getting into role playing at the very beginning, what was the intro? Was it a friend that pulled you in? Did you just run across the red box and be like, "What's this? This is new and different. Look, it's got dragons."
The very first thing. So again, I started with riffs when I was 13, but somewhere before
Right,
that,
right.
which would have been, I think I was somewhere around 8 to 10 years old. My mom took me to the hobby shop for my birthday, and I saw Ninjas and Super Spies. Which, if you're not familiar with Ninjas and Super Spies, dear listener, Google it. You can look while we're talking. But the cover of the book is a ninja kicking a dude who's shooting him with a laser, and there's like a battle going on around them. It's still one of the greatest covers ever. And I was like, well, I like ninjas, and I also like Super Spies, so let me get this. And
Right.
we bought it, and we took it home, and I opened it up, and I just saw math and charts. And I remember distinctly telling my mom, I'm like, oh, this is a computer book. This isn't for me. And
Yeah.
so we returned it, and got a model of the USS Enterprise from Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Nice.
Years later, I would get a copy of Ninjas and Super Spies, and it's still right over there. But that was actually my first brush with it, way back then. And then yeah, as so many people were wont to do, a buddy of mine just got us into playing Rifts,
Rifts, yeah.
and which is a deeply flawed game, but at least it's one of the worst games with one of the best premises, which is this first just like multi-dimensional overlapping thing. Like the poster for Rifts was a F-16 fighter jet being chased by a dragon, which again, Palladium understands how to make great covers.
Right.
Because they made Ninjas and Super Spies also, if that wasn't obvious. And I had a buddy of mine who was a just vintage hipster. Like he was a hipster before it was cool to be a hipster. And he
The
was
double
like, if you're
meaning right in there, built
he
right in.
was. Yes, he literally, like he can truly say he did it before it was cool. He told me, he's like, look, if you're gonna play RPG, you gotta play D&D. And I was like, all right, what's this Dungeons and Additionally Dragons the kids are on about?
Yeah.
And yeah, that was the gateway.
Very similar for me. It was GURPS, and then went into D&D. So riffs and
Starting with
GURPS
GURPS,
kind of seem like a parallel right there to me.
yeah, that's a high bar to start with GURPS, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you want complicated, there you go.
True. I mean, calculating Thaco and Ben Bar's lift gates is like not too difficult after you've played GURPS. That is true.
So eventually, you ended up doing a lot more work in the RPG sphere
Mm-hmm.
down the road with all of the shows you've done, and eventually started doing a lot more diversity stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
How did you kind of decide, you know what, this is really important to me, I want to work on this, and I want my platform to help with that?
Oh, how did I get into it, or how did I begin being such an advocate for diversity?
Either, whichever you think is easier to step into that sphere.
Well, the easy one is, why did I care about diversity? Is because I'm Black in America.
Right. I figured that was going to be the answer. Right.
Right. Yeah. So, it all started so I started creating content for the internet in like 2009. That was when I got into the writing thing and the talk radio show and all that. So I started putting those things up, and I'd make a lot of content like the spiritual significance of Avengers or Clash of the Titans, and how these stories are our mythology, and how they serve the same function for our civilization that they did for past civilizations. Debatably, there's always a debate as to what extent did the ancients believe these things were literally true, and to what extent they didn't, which I guess only they know. Whereas theoretically, we are aware that Superman and Spider-Man don't exist, but we still can have the same psychological impact from those stories, basically. Right. Which, to the point that I wasn't making before, I think you can kind of chart this entire geek renaissance back to 2008 Iron Man. Because that was the first superhero that wasn't kind of a household name, and everybody loved it. And then it was like, oh, but it's okay to love this? It's okay to love Iron Man? Like, well, is it okay if I love Captain America and the Hulk too? Is it okay if I like video games? Is it okay because that was when we really turned the corner of these things being socially acceptable. And not coincidentally, this was when the first generation of people who'd been raised exclusively on these things started to get to tell those stories.
Yeah.
And so when you had the social acceptance now came flooding in, then suddenly it was okay to like D&D also. And then it's like, what's this critical role? Who are these people?
Right.
And then, you know, the fuse was lit. For me now, they object to my telling of this story. They say my timing is off and I'm missing key details. So I'm only telling you my version of events.
It's okay. That's why you're
Is
here, to tell your version
I
of events.
I introduced Damien Poitier and Jason Charles Miller to each other because they were both independently friends of mine.
Okay.
And they got in over at Geek and Sundry. And both of them were on a show called Foreververse, which
Okay.
was one of Geek and Sundry's first TTRPG shows. And back in those days, I still had a full-time day job. And so I was aware they were doing it. And I was kind of like, these sorry sons of bitches are over here doing this. And nobody called me.
Yeah.
Well, like, you guys wouldn't even know each other if not for me. Again, they have a different version of events. You have to ask them about that.
Okay.
They claim it wasn't quite so simple. Who knows? I'm only telling you how I felt. So, one day Damien calls me up and he's like, I got an idea for a show called Ask Your Black Geek Friend, because he was aware of the kind of stuff I'd been doing.
Yeah.
Called me on a Wednesday. We shot the pilot on Saturday. That Monday, Geek and Sundry said they wanted it. That was in March of 2017. But because the gears grind slow, we didn't go up until August.
Okay.
And around the time that we started doing that show, which was all about like not necessarily uncomfortable conversations. It was quite the opposite, but it was like, if you really want to know and you're not sure to ask, you know,
Yeah.
you can ask us and we're not going to make fun of you.
Yeah.
So around then, Tomb of Annihilation came out, where they had the 5th edition facelifted Chult, which is non-specifically D&D Africa.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of D&D Africa with a little of the Philippines. It's kind of it's kind of everywhere with a jungle, kind of all mixed together. Yeah, as you do, you know. And the original Chult was horrifically racist. Cannibal pygmies, people with bones in their noses. And the new Chult was basically just a lazy post-colonial version of that.
Yeah.
So they scraped off the surface level of racism, and it's kind of like, and now the brown people are picking up the pieces. And one thing that I was very vocally critical of publicly was, I was like, this is a fantasy game. Like you could have put the black people on the moon.
Right.
Like it's so it's clear to me this is not intentionally hostile, but it is very tone deaf, and it is clear to me that no people of color had anything to do with this.
Right.
And to Watsy's eternal credit, and Greg Tito, who is no longer with the company, but he was head of PR for a long time, Greg Tito in particular, I always have to shout him out, was like, you're right. We do need, you know, more people that aren't just middle-aged white guys working on these things.
Right.
And so he really started an intentional effort to bring in and work with other people. I was one of those people. You know, Tanya DePass, Jasmine Bular, more people than I can name. It's not my intent to leave anybody out, but that was how that all started. And then that was kind of how I got into the relationship that I enjoy with Watsy. And then I knew I'd been playing RPGs for years at that point, but they all knew me as kind of the talk guy.
Yeah. And
that December of 2017, I got an opportunity to guest in a charity stream where I played Vampire the Masquerade. It was my first time ever playing on stream. It was Jason Carl's first time ever running a game on stream. So that was the night we met, the time we'd both done it.
Okay.
We hit it off. Apparently I did a good job because I got invited back for LA by Night, you know.
Which was great, by the way. I've seen a handful of those episodes.
You should see all 5 seasons. It's quite something. But once I got my foot in the door from that first vampire thing, and people were like, "Oh, he can do this."
Right.
Then I got asked to do all kinds of things. I was on Saving Throw show a bunch of times. My first big crossover was We're Alive Frontier. And then after that, it just kind of took off and never stopped.
Yeah, spiraled.
We're Alive Frontier. Yeah, upward spiral. Yeah. We're both LA by, well, All right, this is where it gets complicated. The first 3 seasons of LA by Night are still on Geek and Sundry's YouTube, and seasons 4 and 5 are on the World of Darkness YouTube. And then all of We're Alive Frontier season 1 and 2, I show up near the end of the first season, and I'm in all of the second season, are also on the Geek and Sundry YouTube.
That's great. So did people start passing your name around to do some of the other non like adjacent like D&D stuff?
Yeah, it's a small world. I
Okay.
mean, it was a smaller world then. It's still a small world now, but it
Yeah.
was a smaller world then. Like I used to say you could fit everybody that makes TTRPGs. I mean, like meaningfully makes TTRPGs.
Right.
You could fit in a Denny's.
Now,
That
wouldn't that
blew
be a
up.
fun party?
It would. Well, I've been to it, so yes, it is. You know, during the pandemic, that blew up a lot. That was no longer true, but now it still might be true again. Honestly, that you could fit everybody that is like meaningfully making things.
Right.
Yeah, in not a very big place, and we all know each other. And if it's somebody I don't know, I'm one step removed. So
You
yeah, it wasn't
mentioned
hard.
the show, the Ask Your Black Friend, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention about the Dear America from a Black Guy as well that you
Mm-hmm.
worked on. Tell
Mm-hmm.
our audience a little bit about that and how that came to be, because I think that that was a very important moment in our culture and in what we're talking about.
It is my long, 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 long suffering documentary, which is still not finished because every time I zoom in on what I need to say in it, the world gets objectively worse.
Yeah.
Um, but it was born out of right after George Floyd was murdered, just kind of the logical extension of what we were doing on Ask Your Black Geek Friend, which was more obviously it was like nerd stuff. You know, it was is it okay if my kid dresses up like Black Panther kind of conversations,
Yeah.
which for the record, yes, it is okay if your kid dresses up like Black Panther because it's okay if little black kids dress like Batman. So
Yeah.
you can't have one and not the other, right?
Right.
um, so yeah, and it's just born out of some uncomfortable conversations that definitely need having
Right.
as a direct response to Black Lives Matter, as a direct response to being able to say, hey, could you please maybe stop killing us, and other people being offended by that.
Right.
But you know, I look around and motion broadly at everything, and so still a work in progress. Turns
Right.
out making a documentary all by yourself is much harder than you might expect. That's turns out.
Well,
My,
as you know, you're not alone. There's plenty of people out there that are like behind you and in that work. So,
mm-hmm.
um, and I do just want to mention, I want to plug locally from Minnesota. I've driven by George Floyd Square hundreds of times for 4 years in my work, and that place always just hits me differently. We lived through everything that happened during that, and our friend Nerd D started a organization called Justice Frontline Aid. Everybody make sure to go and check that out as well, because that's super
we
important.
did a D&D in a castle with Nerdy. He's
Oh, Nerdy's
yeah.
amazing. Yeah, we love him.
Mm-hmm. Also, take lots of pictures of that because they might pull it down soon. And just for the record, not to make things tense for people at home, but if anybody is listening to what we just said and you're feeling uncomfortable or upset about that and being like, why are you bringing that up? Congratulations, you're part of the problem. So, but not you. You who are watching right now, you're cool. I'm talking about those other people.
Those other
not,
people. Right.
not you.
Right.
You're dope. I love
big
love
hearts.
you.
Big hearts.
Yeah, love
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, I wanted to make sure that we talked about that, because it's
Mhm.
important to me, and I know it's important to you. And what kind of a person would I be if I didn't bring that up and have you
Well,
talk about that? Because it
yeah,
means a lot
I
to people.
I appreciate it. It's just, well, the reason why I have a slightly different take on representation. You know, we've been talking about 20 minutes. Let's get down in it.
Yeah.
Slightly different take on representation than some people, and I've kind of had these disagreements with some friend of mine, that I feel real representation is storytelling is what makes us human. It is the only thing we do that no other creature does.
Yeah.
And in the fullness of time, we may find out that whales and dolphins and elephants and crows have been telling each other stories, and we just didn't understand it. But at least as of this exact second, we're the only ones that can.
Right.
We're the only ones that can sit around a fire and talk about the labors of Hercules and take real, meaningful, actionable insights about life and our place in it
Yeah.
from that, from purely fiction. And for me, representation means you need to have both examples of what you want to aspire towards and also cautionary tales. You need to see yourself reflected as hero and villain and victim. You need to see all of the ways that a person like you can exist to be able to see yourself reflected in them. And
Right.
ideally choose the heroic mask to take and put on, but there's value in also seeing that person got hurt like I got hurt. And because at the risk of weaving too many things together, you hear a lot that, or you definitely hear me say a lot, for those of you that were familiar with my work, that the villain is the hero of their own story.
Yeah.
Because both the hero and the villain story starts with pain, always. The hero has been hurt and they don't want anybody else to get hurt. The villain has been hurt and so they want to hurt someone in return.
Yeah.
That's an oversimplification, but
Yeah.
you know that, but
But I get you. I get you.
yeah, but that encapsulates it. So you need to be able to see that. And as such, I don't have any protected classes because I've got friends that are like, and I won't say what representative minority they're a part of,
Right.
except they are one, that it's like if you have a character like me in the story, nothing bad can happen to that person. And I'm like, well, that's not how this works. Because if your representative minority has to be wrapped in bubble wrap, one of two things is going to happen. The audience will not connect to that character at all because they know they're a non-factor. They're orbiting, right?
Right.
Or two, that kind of person will not be involved in the project at all because it's like we've got a different set of rules that we got to follow when dealing with them versus everyone else, and that's bad.
Yeah.
What I will say, I wrote a I wrote the most recent installation of a very famous horror franchise, but I won't say which one.
Okay.
And because I ghost wrote it.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and I put together something that I thought was really dope. I had all kinds of different diverse characters of different walks of life, different sexual orientations, and everything. And one of the first notes I got from a very major Hollywood studio was, can we combine the gay character and the Asian character, and can we kill them first?
Wow.
And I was like, no, no, and no, actually. Yeah, no, that isn't what we're doing at all.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So that's the other side of it. And that is also terrible. And dare I say that's worse, you know? It's because in the world, when the whole kerfluffle about race and D&D started, which I was
Yeah.
very much neck deep and on the front lines of.
Yes.
One
Thank
of
you
the
for that, by the
arguments,
way.
well, thank you. One of the arguments I made from the beginning is that any correlation between race and morality is problematic. Anytime. If you are evil because you were born that way, and if you're good because you were born that way, both of those things are a problem.
Yeah.
And so there's good and bad people, and I'm an optimist. I think human beings are innately good, but some people are wired wrong.
Right. Right.
Some people have been through trauma. Some people are just wired wrong. Psychopaths exist.
Right. Yeah.
And white psychopaths exist, and black psychopaths exist, and Filipino psychopaths exist, and gay psychopaths exist. And I mean,
Right.
it's humans are humans, and as such, there is a very broad spectrum of humans and human motivation. And I think it is important to portray that as often as possible. Like spoiler alert, I'm working on a project right now. Well, I have to be vague because I don't want to spoil it when it comes out.
Yeah.
But it's like it's a bit of a whodunit, and the murderer is going to be a woman because nobody suspects that,
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Okay. Yeah. Have you ever sat and just like sat back and let it sink in for just a moment that you have become a role model for gamers and kids and people, and that they look up to you and what you do out there? Have you
First of
let
all,
that sink
you
into your mind?
stop it. You
No.
stop it. Stop it. You know, yes and no. Um, I'm I am aware of any time I'm on screen, I'm giving certain people permission to be on screen too. Um, I'm also aware of the impact of some of my work has had, because I've gotten so many messages from people over the years that were like, "I'm alive because of you." Um, you know, that I found, something you did at the exact moment that I needed it. And, that helped me make it another day, and that became another day. And so we're here now. So in that, I am aware that it has an impact and that it matters. But the flip side of it is I also know, um, that existence is transitory, in entertainment is the bubble sitting on top of a bubble, sitting on top of a bubble on, on a pinhead type thing.
Right.
So it's almost like I'm just so grateful for all of it. I'm grateful for everything I've gotten to do. I'm grateful for everything that is in the pipeline. I'm grateful to have even had the opportunities that I've had. 'Cause I've been incredibly lucky. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I've worked hard, and you hear that quote that the harder you work, the luckier you get, and
Yeah.
some of that's true.
Yeah.
Some of that is true. But I've had things break my way that were pure coincidence. Like you mentioned being a bodyguard for Evanescence. It's like, well, yeah, but we grew up together in Arkansas. Like so I'm like, I couldn't have known that I was going to grow up side by side with this band that was going to be a worldwide phenomenon.
Right.
But what I was able to control was who I was and who I was being, that when I met the right people, they would see me in the right way. You know what I mean? Because if I just been an unchecked douchebag,
Right.
you know, I'd just be, a Little Rock douchebag somewhere. I guess I made it to Atlanta by then. I'd be an Atlanta douchebag. Yeah. So
Well, sometimes people don't realize when they're in that sphere, and I wanted to bring that up, that like, have you let that sink in yet? So, because there are so many people that like, they see that as like doors being opened for them, and feeling comfortable role playing, because it's, as you mentioned earlier, WotC was headed up by a bunch of old white guys.
I'm gonna say two things.
Yeah.
And this might sound slightly meaner than I intend, but
Okay.
it has been my experience. I find for the people in this space, about 45% of them are failed actors. People that thought they were going to be huge, they thought they were going to win Academy Awards, they thought they were going to, be a big deal, and that hasn't happened, and they are almost bitter about, whatever that they experience here, and it's hard to for them to appreciate what's happened. And then about 45% of people have never had any real attention before. They were never the hot girl. They were never the cool guy. And fame is intoxicating. Having people cheer when you come in the room is addictive. Having
Yeah.
people want your picture is addictive. That's why a lot of times you see athletes and stuff, like when they're past their prime playing, they become like alcoholics or drug addicts and die early. Like it's the spotlight is addictive. It
Yeah.
in don't believe anybody who tells you different. And then there's about 10% of people who understand how incredible and improbable it is that we get to do what we do.
Yeah.
That we get to play freaking games and talk about nerd stuff.
Yeah.
And people listen and care. And you can pay your rent with that? What? That's I never would I have predicted that was going to be a social outcome
Right.
of, my existence in geek spaces growing
Right.
up. And the other thing about me is I'm wholly immune to imposter syndrome. I've got no concept of it. I I've yeah, I
Pass some of
freely
that.
say
Pass some of that this way.
Look, man, I freely admit, and I just said out loud, I've been lucky a lot.
Yeah.
I think things have broken my way a lot, but I also know I've worked incredibly hard, and I've done everything in my power to do right by people.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I've gotten a lot of help in my time, and I've given a lot of help. I've launched a lot of careers, some you know and some you don't, on both sides of the camera. I've launched careers that people don't even know I launched their careers. That I pull someone aside and I was like, "Hey, book that guy. Don't tell him I told you, but him, that's the
Yeah.
guy." You know what I
Awesome.
mean? Uh, so I don't feel in any way guilty of having received hands up at times because I know I gave hands up at other times.
Yeah.
And I know as a human, I have fallen short. I have made mistakes. I have intended to do things I didn't do. I've gone to sleep plenty of nights where the to-do list was not all crossed off. But as a percentage of my existence, I know I've given it my all. I know I've tried.
Yeah.
I have tried my hardest, and I have never intentionally done wrong by anybody. And because of that, you know, it comes how it comes.
Yeah.
And when it comes, I can enjoy it. And when it doesn't come, that's because that's the other thing. It is difficult. It is my defense against bitterness is gratitude. Because the reality is the TTRPG landscape doesn't look the same right now that it did 5 or 6 years ago.
No.
It doesn't look the same as how it peaked during the pandemic. You know, uh, WotC is largely out of the large events business. So, some of those huge. I mean, I guess Dimension 20 just sold out Madison Square Garden, but they didn't bring me out for that one. So, for my purposes, you know, uh, my when I got Invitation to Party, which was the on G4, was the first D&D show on television. I remember in December of 2021, I was like, I have made it.
Yeah.
This everything I wanted ever has culminated in this. I have done it. You know, whatever difficulties I've endured up until now, whatever has happened, whatever defeats I've taken, it has all paid off because I have done it. And that was December, and that was probably the per capita the happiest I've ever been in my life, day to day.
Okay.
And by February, that was all gone through no fault of my own. And one of the things that you learn if you stick around the entertainment business long enough is there is no one thing. Because there's been several times that I was like, oh, this is it. This is the thing.
Right.
Like I have now crossed this threshold, like I have achieved escape velocity,
Yeah.
and now all of that is behind me, you know, that day never comes, you know, it's you just have to keep pushing and just be grateful for where you are when you're there and
Yeah.
be grateful for what's happening when it's happening.
Agreed. Shifting gears back to
Mm-hmm,
the gaming sphere, back to role
mm-hmm,
playing.
mm-hmm.
How do you change your game plan for, say, a home game versus a live stream versus a pre-recorded show versus a live show, live on stage sort of show? When you're planning those, how do you change it up?
I don't. There's only one me. That's actually why I don't really like home games.
Okay.
Because I'm like, turn on a camera, we're leaving content on the floor. Like
Yeah.
I got one speed, man. You know, um, so like when I'm running a game at D&D in a castle versus when I'm running a game, at a live event, it's the same thing. I think if anything, you need to be a little more mindful of the time during a live thing. When we were doing Invitation to Party, we had to take a break every 8 to 12 minutes, and that was hard.
Oh wow.
Having to find a moment of where the story could crescendo. They would keep both the audience and the cast engaged during the break, and then coming back. That was difficult, and I distinctly remember having a meeting with them where I'm like, "You get don't be fooled by the fact that I make this look easy. It is
Right.
incredibly hard. It is incredibly hard what I'm doing. Um, Beyond that, it's the same, man. It's the same. The stories I tell and how I tell them. Because what let me give it to you a different way.
Okay.
and I apply this to my content. And
Okay.
any of you, if you are content creators, take this well to heart. I watched an interview with a truly terrible human being, but made a really great point years ago. It
Okay.
was Vince McMahon. Vince is the worst, but he was right about what I'm about to say.
Okay.
It was right after the then WWF had bought WCW, bought
Okay.
their main rival.
I remember that. Yeah.
And in the interview, they said, "What are you going to do now that you don't have any competition?" And he said, uh, "Literally everything is my competition. They could go watch football. They could go out to dinner with their family. They could turn off the TV and read a book. They could go for a walk.
Right.
I have to do something that is going to make that human being stop what they're doing and pay attention to me and my product." And I bring that to every single thing I do. I never, ever, ever make shopping episodes, ever. I never make filler episodes, ever. The nature of the game, literally and figuratively, is some things are going to hit better than others. And sure, there's a certain narrative crescendo of where you're like, and here's the big battle, and then, and
Right.
here's the big payoff. I mean, that's normal, but something should be happening every episode to the best of your ability, or every session to the best of your ability, because there is only one thing that every single human being on earth is equal in, and that's
Right.
time. We're not all just as smart. We don't all have the same money. We don't all have the same physical capabilities, but we've all got 168 hours in a week. And there's time for literally everything if you plan it right. It may not be
Right.
time every day, maybe not every week, but over the course of a month, 3 months, like you can make it work. And when people try and argue with me that they're like, well, not everybody's got the same 168 hours, I'm like, yeah, they do. Some people have just spent a lot of it already.
Right.
Like if you got 5 kids and 3 jobs, well, you've spent some of your time in advance,
Right. Exactly.
but you've still got it. So when I sit down to the table, I'm like, this person has given me a part of their time, which is literally a part of their life.
Right.
And I take that very seriously with the stories that I try and tell. And that's why I've only got the one speed. I don't have, well, because there's no cameras on. Nah. Now, what I will tell you, the difference between a home game and a stream is, because there is a difference.
Yeah.
A home game is a social event.
Right.
You share a meal together. You talk about the Super Bowl. You complain about politics. You talk about your boyfriend, your girlfriend. You talk about work. Show pictures of your new puppy, and then eventually you roll some dice and you kind of have some fun together.
Right.
Streaming has cut almost all of that out. If
Right.
you're fortunate to be working with some of your friends, you might be having some of those conversations during,
Right.
mic check.
Right.
Remember, notoriously, when we were doing LA by Night, I won't name anybody, but some people had this protracted process where they had to get into character and they had to go and listen to music, and you couldn't talk to them and all this stuff as they were like doing. Alex and I would be sitting on set. I remember once we were just talking about Pokemon. And we're just like, blah, 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 blah. And they're like 20 seconds. And we're like, yeah, blah, 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 Squirtle. And they're like 5, 4. And he and I both just go. And they counted it in. And it's like, we're vampires now. I mean,
Yeah.
we're just like, yeah. And
Flip
now I'm
the
a
switch.
vampire.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I only got one speed.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, on that same note, is there a difference between having a full party or doing like a one-on-one like God Killer?
So I pride myself on having moved this pastime forward in 2 ways. Not me alone, but I certainly helped.
Right.
Which is level 20 play.
Yep.
Because when I first started this, fewer than 5% of campaigns had a level 20 character in them. Not even had played from 1 to 20, even had a level 20 character. So that
Right.
includes one-shots, high-level stuff. And I've done so much of that, a lot more people do high-level play now. Because they used to be like, oh, it's so dangerous. I'm like, no, it's not. The game's most dangerous from level 1 to level 3. When a goblin can crit with an axe and kill you and no
Right.
one can bring you back. That's
Right.
when the game is dangerous.
Yeah.
And the other thing is those one-on-one games. I did a whole season of a show called One-on-One Shots, where I just sat down and played with just one person. We did it during the pandemic, to show that is a possible thing. And yes, I did most recently did one of those was God Killer,
Mhm.
with Miss Gina Darling, and I did it for Connie Chang when they were first rolling out God Killer. But the same thing. It was the same. It just was. It's like, imagine if for me, it takes 1 unit of effort to pass the ball to you, and it takes 1 unit of effort to pass the ball to person number 2, and it takes 1 unit of effort to pass the ball to person number 3. When it's just me and you, it's still my 1 unit of effort to pass the ball to you.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, it's more effort for you to keep passing it back.
Pass it back and forth.
When you would have had a break while I was waking it away around. For me, it's just the same thing. I like it. I like it because you can get very deep. I think my optimal setup is probably 2 players.
Okay.
Because you can still dive pretty deep, and you have the capacity for another human being to surprise you.
Yeah.
You know, because I've got a broad imagination, but it is not limitless. I'm still constrained, you know, by the meanness of it all.
Yeah.
And so's that other person. And so if you have another person in, they can just like be a multiplier, I suppose, and then they can theoretically interact with each other.
Yeah.
I think that's good. But yeah, otherwise it's not that hard.
Yeah, I enjoy one-on-ones. It feels more intimate to me sometimes, but there seems to be something missing if you don't have that other player character, that other player to be there to bounce off, 2 players bouncing off back and forth, like you said. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you got somebody who's really going to engage and buy in, because a lot of people have negative habits. Sometimes the negative habits, sometimes they really can't help it if that's how their brain works, where they disengage and they zone out when it's not, when the camera's not on them, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so when the camera's only ever on you, it becomes a little easier.
Right. Tell us a little bit about Undisputed Academy, what you're doing there, that work, all of the things that people can get from that.
So I have 4 finished programs and 3 that are in pre-sales right now.
Okay.
The first are 14-day DM and 14-day player, where I will teach you everything that you need to know to be a professional in this space. All of the tools that you need to have to learn how to run games and play games at a professional level. And even if it is not your aspiration to be on camera, I think it should be everybody's aspiration to play the game the best that they can, if only to honor your friends and the fact that they're spending their time with you.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious to me because people always talk about the gag about, oh, scheduling is the real boss of D&D and we can't all get together. Never had that problem. Never. At one point, when I was running games via my Patreon, I still have a Patreon, but I'm not currently running live games. But at the height of it, I was running 30 to 40 games a month for 18 months, which I don't recommend. It's a lot. It's too much. But I had people from all over the world getting up 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning to be at those games, coming on their birthday, coming on their day off, just wanting to come on holidays, because the experience I was providing was something they didn't want to miss.
Right.
And so I tell you, storytellers, if you have trouble with people showing up, make sure you're providing an experience that is worth them showing up. And I don't mean the unforeseen. Somebody gets a flat tire, the babysitter cancels, that happens. But if you're consistently having trouble getting asses in seats, that's your problem. You're not providing an experience that can't be missed. So that is why I think it is important to possess some of these skills, both as a storyteller and as a player. There is also a 14-day TTRPG creator. If you want to learn how to create TTRPG content, both, again, for your table at a high level and potentially go professional with it, and 14-day writer, which is more general. I'm one of the very few people, possibly only people. It's like, I used to say it's J. Michael Straczynski, Neil Gaiman, and me, and Neil Gaiman's in trouble right now, but the man has still accomplished what he's accomplished.
That's true.
That's true. Yeah. Has published novels, comic books, graphic novels, had film and television produced, And then I said, I'm the only one that's written for TTRPGs. Apparently, Neil Gaiman wrote the foreword for a World of Darkness book, but that doesn't count. That doesn't count. You
Right.
know, whatever else you say about him, that doesn't count. You know, because I've had film and television produced and everything else. So uh, there's very few people that can speak with some authority on having done these things professionally. So 14 Day Writer is about that. How to establish yourself in multiple genres and what are the foundational elements that you need to know, because there's 8 billion people on this planet, and again, we're all different, different races, different genders, different intellects, different everything, but we're all made out of the same parts, plus or minus a couple of parts, of course.
Right.
In what I understand is I understand, the bones in the sinew and the heart and the lungs of what makes stories, and what makes them effective. And when you understand that, it is not difficult to apply that in different mediums. So I say I will save you 5 years off of your story for your adventure into becoming a professional writer. I'll save you 5 years. The other ones that are up for pre-sales are simpler and more complicated versions of those things. But you check out the undisputedacademy.com. You can see it. And also you can book to have me come run games for you at your table if you want to see what it's really like. I'll warn you in advance. It's not cheap, but I also warn you, it's super worth it.
Super worth it. Super worth it. And you got your you mentioned Patreon.
Yep.
You've got a Ko-fi page, right?
Yeah, but I mean, that's just a tip jar for the Ko-fi. Ko-fi coffee. I think it was coffee, isn't it? I don't know. It's one of those things we've all read.
We looked up on their they did a meeting, like one of their, because I had the same argument. Somebody said Ko-fi, somebody said coffee, somebody said Ko-fi.
Because you're supposed to like buy
a coffee, right? That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody told me I was wrong, and we went and we looked up. They did one of their creators did an interview, and they kept saying Ko-fi. I was like, well, if they're saying it, I'm going to say it like they say it.
Ko-fi.
So,
all right, yeah.
But
so they say Ko-fi.
That's the one video of one of their people pronounce it that way. Whether it's potato.
I do feel like they don't understand their own branding. If that's like if the whole thing
that's
is
what I thought.
buy me a
coffee, yeah,
with a mug next to it, and you're like,
that was my argument. That was exactly my argument.
Well, that is just a tip jar. If you want to drop a coin to your Witcher. The Patreon, there's currently 3 tiers. I kept it real simple. There's one for players, one for DMs, and an advanced one. Just $5, $10, or $15. Because my last Patreon was too much, and it became, quite frankly, unsustainable over time. I'm truly grateful that it was as successful as it was, but again, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So this time I tried to make it not that. So it'd be less effort for me to be able to maintain, still be able to give some value. So that is patreon.com/BDaveWalters. BDave Walters everywhere.
I always thought about I should do a Patreon. I should do a thing where the community can come and I'll GM. And then I immediately thought of well, what if there's 3,000 people for some reason show up? I don't have the time for that. So I was like, maybe I won't do that. And here we go.
I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you with this in real time. Statistically speaking, that is improbable. It's not impossible, but it's improbable. But the way you get around that is you just decide in advance, what can you do? If you're like, I can run 1 game a week, there's 1 game a week. First come, first serve. If you decide you can do 2, there's worse things than supply and demand. The problem is, and here's what's difficult. Another thing, dear listener, I tell you, this applies to everything in life. Because I guess one thing that I didn't say, for all these things I've done, these aren't actually the thing I usually do. What I actually do is I'm a marketing executive. My actual background is sales and marketing. These other things are fun, and I just happen to be good at them. But whenever you are plying your trade and it requires you to be physically present for something, there is innately a limit on how much you can make. And the limit may be high. I mean, Taylor Swift is getting plenty of money for the tour, but there's still a limit,
right?
Because there's only one her. I guess it's what the Kansas City Chiefs and is it the Eagles that are about to go to the Super Bowl?
I think so.
Again, those guys are all gonna make a lot of money that day, but they can only make a fixed amount of money because they still have to be there doing that thing. So the more you can sort of outsource your brain by having things like programs like the undisputedacademy.com and things of that nature, or YouTube videos or podcasts where the words that you're saying are working 24 hours a day, even while you're sleeping.
Right.
That is the optimal. I'll put it like that.
Tell us a little bit about your work for the Multiverses RPG. Marvel
Oh,
Multiverses.
this whole thing.
Yeah.
The Marvel Multiverse. That the
Because
X-Men book.
we brought you, we mentioned you last time around when we had Matt Forbick on. At the end, I mentioned you were coming on. He was like, "Oh yeah, he worked on this, and it was awesome."
The other ones I've done are over there. They're out of reach. Yeah, I got to work on the X-Men book for the Marvel RPG. I got to work on the Cataclysm of Kang. Wrote an adventure for that. Both of which were really wonderful. You know, those were gems in my infinity gauntlet of geekness, having gotten to contribute, you know, to D&D in the continuity of D&D. Now, I mean, these are not in continuity with the comic books.
Right.
I don't think anybody's gonna, you know, read my Cataclysm of Kang and be like, that's what it is now. But I still got to tell stories with those characters, you know. It was a beautiful thing to get to do.
And you never know. Maybe they'll do throwbacks in one of the movies down the road to something you did. And you'll be like, oh my God.
There's a reason why it's right. See, there's vampire right there. First of all, there's Tiamat. I love her.
Yeah.
That's my baby. And then vampire. They got the D&D red box there, you know, for those who know what's up.
Old school.
You know, and they got that there. Yeah, and then see there's Jason Carl up there, and then there's Jasper hiding. He's up there. You know, this is very low resolution. So there's my Cthulhu mug. That's the Almighty Xanathar in a Funko. It's my G4 hat, my Black Dice Society. That's Orcus. He's in there. You can't really make him out, but that's how Orcus works. And these are all like second edition box sets of D&D back there. So
that's great.
Yeah, and then wait, it is Call of Cthulhu over there, and then various decaying Draco liches.
Do you have anything for the Motherlands RPG?
Not physically to show right now, though we were just at a meeting earlier today about getting the quick start out. It's you know, for that one we had everything done. We had our publisher and everything with Andrews McMeal, and then they were like, we're getting out of the TTRPG business, and had to start over completely from scratch.
No.
Yes.
They could have just waited till you were done and been like, okay, now we're...
You know, here's the thing. I felt that way initially. I was like, why couldn't you have shipped our book? But I'm actually happy that they told us, because there's another book that they were working on, and I will not name what it is, but Google is free, that they did sort of muscle out and really just kind of did a half-ass job. I mean, the book is gorgeous, but just got no support. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's, you know what I mean? It's like dating someone who's over it and is still just kind of phoning it in. It's like, you know what? Let's just tear off the Band-Aid, okay?
Yeah.
Like,
you'd rather put it out there and get the support and get the backing.
Yeah.
The possibility of more stuff down the road with them. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have to just go through the motions. So, but it's coming along. It's beautiful.
Awesome. Tell our audience a little bit about it.
So, Into the Motherlands was the initially the brainchild of Tanya DePass. I think they did 2 or 3 seasons of the Into the Motherland stream, where Twitch tapped her to be able to create an original IP, and she tapped me due to my evil genius. And the conceit that I came up with was so I apologize, because I realized this is my own story that I'm about to misquote. I believe this was in the 14th century. It has been a long day. I've been alive since 5 a.m., so I apologize. Pretty sure it's the 14th century, but it's sometime in the past.
Right.
There was an Ethiopian king named Mansa Musa, who was a real person.
Okay.
And he said he was sending a fleet to the New World, which, at least according to standard history, never arrived. I actually think they did arrive. I think that was the Olmecs. That's neither here nor there.
Okay.
For our purposes, this fleet, through a mechanism that has yet to be revealed in the campaign world, but I know, was picked up in it was around 800. It was around the year 800. It was about 1,000 years ago.
Okay.
Was picked up and transported to a different planet. And so they have now been on that planet for basically about 3,000 years, because it's the modern day, but there's been 3,000 years of life on this other planet.
Okay.
And so it is an Afrocentric sci-fi story of where these different cultures, and there's aliens and things, are flourishing on multiple planets and just what that is like. Because
Okay.
our core conceit is it was supposed to be a world without colonialism.
Okay.
And I tried to keep going back further and further and further in Earth's history to find such a time, and there kind of wasn't one. So I had to make one.
All right. Thank you for
It's
the
kind
link.
of like it's like Star Trek: The Next Generation meets Black Panther.
Okay.
Mhm.
For those of you that are listening, it's motherlandsrpg.com. You can go check out everything over
There you
on
go.
there. So I
It's
appreciate you talking about that.
it's so dope.
Tell us about your upcoming events. We know you're doing D&D in a Castle. July 3rd, 13th, and 17th are sold out.
Oh,
13th
great.
through the 17th are sold out. You got July 3rd is still open for D&D in the Castle. What else you got going on?
Yep. I guess I didn't say out loud. I'm the lead developer for Into the Motherlands. I guess I should actually say that. Tanya's creative director. I'm lead developer. I make everything hook together and work. She tells me what to hook together and work. So let's see. I got Founders and Legends and Gary Con coming up in March. I don't know the dates.
That's all right.
Um,
Google is our friend.
then there is. That's in March. Then we got Darkness Emergent here in LA, which is a vampire LARP. That is in May. Then I got, like you just said, I got D&D in a Castle in Ohio in early July. And then right after that, I go over to England for our first time at the new venue over there later in July. Then I'm back at D&D in a Castle in November. Then I literally, in the time we were talking here, just got tapped for another event, but I got to make sure I don't accidentally double book myself.
Okay.
And then there's going to be some other stuff sprinkled to boot in there. And like I
Okay.
said, if you want me to come to you, also check out the undisputedacademy.com.
There you go. Undisputed Academy.
Mhm.
Of course,
And I guess,
Go ahead.
no, you.
I was just gonna rehash the links and all your social medias.
Yeah, no, well, if you're a business minded person on LinkedIn, I've been posting a whole lot more about like how D&D and storytelling applies to business, because I've been fortunate to travel all over the world doing workshops and team building and networking events for corporations. So I'm
You're everywhere.
got a lot of got a lot of arrows in this quiver, man.
Every time I turn around, I see you somewhere doing something different. So
listen, man. I thought I was smart. I had diversified interests. I was in streaming. I was in comic books. I was doing business stuff. I was writing movies. I was on TV. And then everything hit the icebergs all at the same time. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, we're planting corn. It's like, well, there was a fire. The corn burned down. That's cool. We got potatoes. Well, the potatoes got potato rot. Well, that's all right because we got the sheep. Sheep all ran away. It was like, oh, great. So I am a mercenary, just doing whatever I can do to keep the plates spinning, man.
Well, we appreciate the plates spinning. We appreciate your work and everything you do in the sphere, in the gaming community, outside of the gaming community, in the entertainment world. It's very much appreciated. People, if you are watching, if you are listening, motherlandsrpg.com, theundisputedacademy.com. On all the social medias, Blue Sky, Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook, X, all of those, Ko-fi, Patreon, or Coffee, if you say it like we say it. B. Dave Walters on all of those. B. Dave Walters. Across the board.
Hey, look, you can call it whatever you want. If you send me a Ko-fi, just make a note in there what we're gonna call it, and it'll be right.
Yeah, there you go. So, guys, coming up February 10th, Emmy award-winning game designer Carlos Cabrera is going to be joining us to talk about his life and career. Don't worry, guys, we're definitely going to talk about the Night Vale RPG. I'll make sure that we bring that up. Of course,
nice.
Also coming up, best-selling author Kevin Hearn returns. Also, comic book legend Jim Zub is coming back. RPG designer.
Wait, hang on. You're reading a script, and this is important. I have to say, my comic book career exists because I listened to Jim Zub's advice. He was right about everything.
Okay.
He's become my friend since then, but I never would have gotten to write D&D, Dungeons and Dragons: A Darkened Wish, or finish Electropunk, or any of the things that I'm still working on to this day if I hadn't listened to Jim Zub. He is a genius. Listen to everything he says and do it.
Jim's up.
Please
I'm
continue.
so excited. We were gonna have him on in December, and then I got pneumonia. And
Well,
so he's like,
there's
"It's
that.
okay. I'm cool." He was super cool. We were able to push it back and get a new time scheduled. So I'm very thankful to that, and I look very much forward to having him on the show. So yeah, definitely come and join us for that. Guys, please rate, review, subscribe, follow, push all of those buttons. It helps us, and in turn helps our guests. So
You got to tell the Night Vale guy that I said there are no dogs allowed in the dog park. Night Vale people will know what I mean. Yeah.
I love Night Vale. I listened to that for like the first 3 years of it.
Me too.
And I was when I heard that there was an RPG, I was like, I messaged the people that were promoting it. I was like, "Who's the designer? I need to have them on the show." And they're like, "It's this guy." I was like, "Great, we're having it."
Well, shout out to the faceless old woman who lives in your house. Yep.
I love it. I love it. It's always fun when I get to talk to a fellow Night Vale enthusiast. So
I would also like to say all hail the mighty glow cloud. Yeah.
every time I see a black helicopter in the sky, I'm always like, "Yep, there it is."
There it is.
There it is.
Yep.
Guys, go check out Undisputed Academy. For me, Dave Walters, I am Nick, and I want to thank you all for listening to Epic Realms.